Hello and welcome to another episode of the Kurerie podcast. In today's episode, we interview Joshua Gabriel Oluwaseyi, a 22-year-old Nigerian environmentalist, climate activist, storyteller, and Teen Vogue 21 Under 21 honoree. He's also the founder of LEARNBLUE, an international youth-led non-profit organization creating awareness and inspiring individual actions against global environmental issues that threaten our planet. I hope you enjoy listening to today's episode.
Hi, my name is Joshua Gabriel Oluwaseyi. I am the executive director of LEARNBLUE. I am on Teen Vogue as one of Teen Vogue's 21, and you're listening to the Kurerie podcast.
Thank you, Joshua, for joining us today. Welcome to the Kurerie podcast.
Thank you.
I'm inspired by the work you do, and I did a bit of, we'll say professional stalking, because I tried to find out more about you to make sure that I got I got good questions to ask you in this episode. But I know that I know a bit about your story and how you got into sort of the climate change space, but I would like you to introduce yourself to us. Tell us a bit about yourself, what drives you, anything you'd like us to know. Like, who is Joshua Oluwaseyi?
That's a heavy one. Thank you so much, Zulu. I can call you Zulu, right?
Yes,
Thank
you
you
can.
so much for inviting me on the podcast. I am Joshua. I hate talking about myself. That's a fun fact. But I am Joshua Gabriel Oluwaseyi. I am a Nigerian climate activist. I am a communications expert, and I don't know. I don't know. I'm just an environmentalist, I guess. My journey. Yeah, I am an activist who's been an activist since I was about 18, 19 years old. Obviously, I know we're gonna get into how I started it, so I'm not gonna give too much away. But basically, I founded a nonprofit organization that is called LEARNBLUE, which essentially creates awareness around climate change amongst young people, Generation Z individuals specifically. And for the most part, we try to inspire young people to found their own nonprofit organizations, to join movements, to lead movements, and just make change generally. So I think that's me.
Thank you for that great introduction. I also hate talking about myself. I feel like whenever someone asks me, like, tell me about yourself, I go blank. Like, all I can remember is my name. But you did
Same.
a good job. You did a good job. Like, I read a bit more about you and your past, and again, what got you into the climate change space. And one of the things that I noted in one of the many interviews and many features that have been done on you
Ah,
was that you had allergies to pollution fumes, if I'm not mistaken, and that's
yeah,
really what made you
yeah.
like
I still
sit
have
up
them,
and think, okay.
unfortunately.
Oh wow. Oh well, but
Yeah.
I think it's inspiring that even with those allergies, you found a way to like educate people about climate change, about air pollution, and about the effects that it has on not just each and every one of us as individuals, but on the world at large. And I love that you're focused on young people. If you know a bit about Kurerie, you'd know that that's like one of like our major pressure points. It's about bringing young people into the development space and into the development conversation and getting them talking about like the change they can create in the world, be even beyond the SDGs, because to be honest, the SDGs are ending in a few years. Beyond that, how they can like make an impact.
You said the SDGs are ending in like a few years, which is obviously in 2030. And I'm saying that's absolutely right. And we're probably going to get a new revised version of that again, that we need to look forward to. So yeah, even outside the development space, I agree.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, like the SDGs, before the SDGs were the Millennium Development Goals. So yeah, so definitely I agree with you that there will probably be another revamp of it and stuff like that. But hopefully, it like each point or each target of the SDGs could be achieved to a certain extent, and it would be great if like everyone could be achieved. But I mean, we'll see. But yeah, basically what I was trying to say is that getting young people involved in these conversations is so important, and I love that Learn Blue is basically doing that, trying to get young people involved in the climate change conversation, getting them involved in campaigns and Which brings me to like my next point, which was on a campaign that you ran, hashtag for a cleaner nation. I hope that I got that right. Could you just tell us a bit about how you thought of the hashtag for a cleaner nation social media campaign, what it was about, what you wanted to achieve with that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, obviously, I had founded LEARNBLUE like a couple months by now. The goal was, I want to create awareness about the global goals. I want to talk about climate change and stuff like that. But I had this, like I said, I do have quite I have a thing for media, so I'm often like doing interviews or like I don't know, just around people who work in TV. And so I was invited by a friend of mine to an interview at on NTA, which you're familiar with because we're both Nigerians. It was a show not related to climate change, just something about music. And I had gone to the studio in Yaba in Lagos to go record that episode. And then as I was coming out of the studio, I noticed sort of this what do you call it? It's like a canal. It's like, I think we call it canals here. It may not be grammatically correct, but like a drainage channel of sorts that had a bridge over it. Before and after the bridge, you had like massive amounts of like styrofoam polluted, sort of deposited in this waterway, right? So it was essentially stagnant, and it shouldn't be stagnant because you could see that it was channeling water towards some direction. But because of the amount of styrofoam, and by styrofoam, for those who are listening, I mean what we call takeaway plastic. That's the one that's like foam. That's what we had there, like yellow, orange, different colors. And to me, that was just an awful sight, right? Again, this was a very early part of my career as an activist, and so even then, I didn't know nearly enough as I do now about climate change and pollution, but I knew that was essentially bad and that wasn't good, and I did not like what I was seeing. And so I took a photo of it. And I was like, oh, this looks bad. I'm going to do something about it somehow. And I left that photo in my gallery for a couple of weeks. And then I had a campaign with another organization, like something very, again, different from climate change necessarily. And then I was going towards Ikoyi, I think. And so I found myself, I was using public transport at the time. And so I found myself in, Obalende Market or Balogun. I'm not sure. I think it's Obalende under bridge or somewhere around there. And I saw another drainage channel that essentially had, you know, plastic, like this time in all forms. You had nylon, you had sachet water, you had plastic bottles, you had glass. Basically, had a shit ton of, permit me for using the word shit, but we had a ton of but non-biodegradable waste in this place. And as you know, if you've I think you live in Lagos. Lagos is very busy and everybody is everywhere and everybody's selling something at every corner. And so you had people selling, buns and snacks and pastries by this drainage channels. And for me, it wasn't even about the fact that it was polluted. It was more like, this is a health hazard. Like, it wasn't affecting me because there was no smoke, there was no dust necessarily, but it was a health hazard. And I grew up in Festac Town, which is very secluded from the rest of Lagos. So, my experience wasn't rough, in quotes. So when I left the comfort of Festac and I was about 18, I'm like, this is new, this is wrong. And I decided to take a
Hmm.
photo as well. And then when I got home, I was trying to figure out the best way to approach this. What can I do that would be meaningful? And as a Nigerian and as an African, the one thing we know is you can hardly convince the older generation to do anything. Like, the way we treat culture and respect, which obviously is a good thing.
Yeah.
I couldn't talk to my grandma or my senior brothers or my cousins and say, talk about climate change, for example, or even decide to begin sensitizing the market women about how this is wrong. And so I
Yeah.
said, you know what? I'm gonna go on social media. I had worked as a social media manager at the time for a startup, and I said, I'm pretty good at social media. I'm pretty good at writing content. So why not go on social media and talk about this? And so I made this tweet, which, if you found it, then you really did some great job with your research. But I know it's still somewhere on my Twitter feed right now. I made a tweet, and I had said in the tweet something about, obviously, the impact. I made like a thread, sort of talking about how this was bad, but not just bad because climate change. Because most people don't care about climate change in Nigeria. People are thinking about how you're going to get your next meal, or how you're going to get to work the next day. Climate change is not at the forefront of our concerns. So I made
Yeah.
it more about their personal health. How does this affect you? You're gonna, if there's a flood in Lagos right now, what happens? You're gonna have those plastics and those broken glass and literally anything sort of floats in the water, and that could injure you, that could transmit waterborne diseases. There's just 1 million and one thing that could possibly go wrong with polluting your environment like that. And so, to my I guess surprise, I asked my friends to help me retweet it. These are people who have a lot of following on Twitter, and they did. And then it began to sort of pick up steam, and people were like, "Oh my god, this is so true! Thank you for sharing this. This is amazing." But again, as somebody who had a bit of an experience with social media managing and marketing, I knew that if I really wanted to push the conversation forward, we needed to bring it under a single banner that could, quote unquote, trend. And so I had a friend reach out who said, "Oh, what do you think about us making this into like a cleanup campaign? Like, hey, if you're interested in cleaning up, these places, basically send me a
Hmm.
DM or send Joshua a DM, and let's do something." And again, even that went more viral. Like we had, I don't know, I think 100,000 views on the tweet or
Oh
something. But
wow.
yeah, and for me at 18, that was a lot of people. It's like a hundred
Hmm.
thousand people are seeing this, and after the 100,000, you had over 100 people who were physically able to come volunteer, and you had over 1,000 people who were helping in donations and like buying materials to clean up. And I was just stunned by the community that were generated.
Yeah.
And so I decided that we should brand the campaign hashtag for a cleaner nation, hashtag for a cleaner Lagos specifically, because I had worked with the Lagos State government during the election of the current governor of Lagos State, the first election, and we had devised this hashtag for a greater Lagos, I think, for his campaign in 2018 or so, or 2019. And so I said, what would be better than just sort of tapping into that already existing audience for a greater Lagos
And
and do
yeah.
for a cleaner Lagos instead. And that was it. And it just sort of stuck. And everyone was like, for a cleaner Lagos, and then we made it into a thing. And before you knew it, we had like about, I think, a consecutive 3 week or so campaign where we went out every weekend to go clean up these places that were complained about, and also spoke with the government on how they can help, and do a lot of sensitization in a number of areas around Lagos. And it was such a massive success, so much so that the government adopted the hashtag for a cleaner Lagos from us. So they made it into like an
Yeah.
official government program. Obviously, they didn't give us any credits because it's Nigeria, but
Well.
they made that into a thing. And due to that, I'm very proud that we're able to do that. Even though, again, it never got acknowledged that it was young people like myself and a couple of other people on Twitter who started this movement. But that's sort of the story. I know that was quite long. I've got a thing for telling stories, but
No,
yeah, that's
it's
sort of how it all
okay.
went.
You're good. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds amazing. And it's funny how like something that started off small with you just tweeting just slowly grew and grew and grew into something this huge and impactful. So kudos to you. Like fantastic job. And like even if no one else knows that you started this hashtag and you started this campaign, anyone listening this call knows. So but I'd like to know like you've spoken about this hashtag and like sort of your start in this activism and in this climate activism journey. But like, is that what led you to start Learn Blue, or was there something else that sort of made you think, okay, I think that we need an organization that educates young people?
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Lemblue had been existing before that, actually. Lemblue was already existing. I
Oh
think I
wow,
founded
okay.
Lemblue. Yeah, I founded Lemblue like in March, 2019. The campaign happened around like July, August 2019 to like October. So Lemblue was already existing for like 5 months at a time, and we're sort of still trying to figure out what we're gonna do and how we're gonna make impact. And so, if anything, the campaign showed me that one of the strengths that we have as Generation Z individuals and young people is we use social media a lot, and so we can mobilize people using social media. Greta Thunberg, for example, when she started Fridays for Future, She started it in front of the parliament in a country, but it went viral because it got featured on social media and people retweeted it and it became a thing. And now we have millions of young people marching every year. So, what the campaign essentially just validated that LEARNBLUE could be a success for me. Right, LEARNBLUE already existed. We're already sort of building the brand and like websites, and I think already had like a bit of a small team at the time. So what LEARNBLUE, what essentially happened was that was sort of our proof of concept that we can make impact, and then we piggybacked off of For a Cleaner Nation, and then expanded that across the Amazon fire situation in 2019, I think, as well. Mauritius Oil spill in 2020, and sort of campaigns like that.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. And I love how you said that like using social media was sort of a proof of concept to show you that like okay, this is something that we could do and this is something that we could work on. Yeah, it was good. It was good to hear about your background, your story, what really like inspired you to start Learn Blue, to start these amazing campaigns that have made impact and to educate, as you said, the Gen Z audience on climate change and how they could create a change in that area. But okay, so this we don't really do failures here. So I don't really like the word failure because I feel like it just like I don't know, it's a dark word. What we say here is that maybe not so wins or not so great moments, but do you think that there are certain things that happened or that have happened on your journey as a climate activist, as the executive director of Learn Blue, that I wouldn't say you would change, but maybe like if you could have, you might have avoided doing those things? Or, okay, let me put it like this: like, what is the biggest lesson that you've learned from your journey, like as executive director of Learn Blue?
Yeah. I miss the good old days when I was like 19, 18, and I was like, oh, I'm a 19-year-old climate activist, and I'm making change. And then there was so much freedom and carefreeness where because we're so young, we didn't have as much, or I didn't have as much responsibilities. And then I got into, I took a gap year just so I could build Lemblue, by the way, an entire year off of school, which I don't necessarily regret. If anything, I learned a lot in that time, and I met some amazing people who are still my friends today. But I think my biggest lesson was, it's a good lesson, though. Actually, I just sounded Nigerian making a good lesson, though. But yeah, it's a good lesson. It's one was obviously that we can literally anybody could do anything. And in my case, since Lemdo was founded, we've never raised funds like externally. We've never had grants. It's always been like self-funded, or I've had team members from other countries who like chipped in. So I am not from a wealthy home necessarily. I am just quote unquote your average guy who happens to be pretty good at talking to people, who use that gift or talent to inspire people around Nigeria to make change. But I think in terms of Lemblus and I don't want to call them, they're not, like you said, they're not failures, maybe setbacks or regrets. Not regrets, that's even darker, but setbacks that I experienced would be in Nigeria. Generally, you have like 1 in 10 people. Again, this is not statistically backed. Although I'm studying statistics, so I guess I could say it is. Um, but there's like 1 in 10 young people who were willing to start a nonprofit. I think 1 in 3 or 4 who run that nonprofit for more than a year,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe 1 in 2 who like make it a thing for like over 2 years. It's so stigmatized and so quote unquote hard for a number of reasons, obviously. So my setback was my lesson was that the people were not for me, and I had to very quickly understand that if I am to keep up with Lembley, if I am to keep being a change maker, I need to quickly decide why I am a change maker, right? I needed to understand what it was that motivated me, which is why you've seen so many quote unquote interviews or features of me where I talk about my allergies. It's not because I want to be redundant and repeat the same story like it's a talking point. It's not, but that is why I am able to keep Lembley going. I had a mental breakdown last year. I had a mental breakdown in 2021 and 2022, like back to back. It was massively draining, and I have university as well, and I have everything in between, and I have adulthood. Um, but because I know why I do learn blue, why it's important, why my allergies are still prevalent, they still exist. So if I still walk out into where there's smoke, I could get my chest compressions and I could begin to cough very badly. I learned very early on to not, stop. So that's the lesson I learned. Just defining your why at a very early age or a very early stage is important, right? So that's not necessarily, again, I'm thankful that the lesson I've learned is not necessarily bad. If anything, it's just oh, that's a realization. One, my immediate family, my immediate friends, I lost a lot of them because, again, being an activist or starting a nonprofit is stigmatized. It's not something anybody's encouraging you to do, especially if you would need financial support from your family. Which, it's like, why would anybody give you money to go do something that doesn't give you money? It didn't make sense at the time. Now, obviously, everybody's a lot proud. It's like, oh, you're on Teen Vogue and you're on Forbes. Oh, oh, that's our son. You know how it is in Nigerian homes. It's like, well, that's my friend. I know him. He's speaking in some conference now. So I learned that very early on. But if not that I had decided or I had understood my why, I honestly would have given up like 3 years ago, and I would not have connected with you or met you, and you would not have found me, and you wouldn't even know who Joshua is. I would have just like faded into oblivion. So even now that I've been through like a mental breakdown and crises, I am able to say, you know, the world isn't going anywhere. I mean, climate change is a looming threat, obviously, but there are other people around you who can take up this mantle and make the impact you're trying to make. So take time off for yourself, which is what I've been doing the past year, really, and rebuild and regroup and come back when you're stronger. Because otherwise you're just gonna burn out, and that's not good for anyone.
Yeah, you said a lot just now, and first off, I love that you said define your why. I think that is so important to keep any young person going because it's like a very frustrating. The development sector is very frustrating for young people. Like I know right now where I work, I'm like I'm pretty sure I'm like the only person in my 20s, and that's not to knock on the organization, but it just shows that like it's first of it's a very narrow path for young people to get into that industry. I mean, I think it was last year I was speaking to a friend of mine who was a consultant at the UN just after she finished I think she just finished university in Geneva, and she she like she had to get a job, if not she would like had to leave the country, and she still wanted to like stay in Geneva, so she got a job working at the United Nations, one of the UN systems, one of the UN bodies. And she told me that as the difference between her working in the United Nations and her working as a consultant was completely different because first off, the organization that she was working with, most of the people who were making the major decisions were cis white men. Like they were old and they were older too. So it was very frustrating for her. She's black. She's she's from Africa. She's not well, she's British, but like she's her roots are African. She's a woman and she's young. So three things were going against her already. So it was very frustrating for her to work in that system. And I remember her giving me the advice that, oh, if I do want to work with the UN in the future, she would advise that I'm older when I go into that system because like my voice will be respected more. And I don't, and like, and that's the reality of it. I mean, I would like to change that, but that's the situation right now. And it also brings me to another thing I read recently on LinkedIn again, where someone said that I don't remember the exact figure, said 0.7 or so percent of only 0.7 or so percent of youth-led climate activism is funded. That's like such a low number. So if you think about the funding alone that goes to young people and youth-led organizations, you'll be frustrated already. You'll be like, oh, okay, well, this doesn't seem like it's working out. So let me just like face what can like pay the bills. But you also want to help people.
Yeah, that's yes. That is so me right now. Sorry to interrupt. Like I am in such a weird. Fortunately, right, I'm very fortunate. I don't even try to not acknowledge that privilege. It's not privilege, rather. It's more like, again, being fortunate and lucky. And I think privilege stems from like having access that people don't have, probably because of like your skin tone or your family ties. But my family doesn't have those, so I had to create every opportunity that I've gotten, and I've had to create access. But my point is to what you're talking about with regarding deals, like I want to be an activist. I just want to be an activist who speaks and who tells stories and who travels and who makes change. But it's not that simple, especially for people of color, especially for those of us who are African, who are
Yeah.
Nigerians. There is such a weird stigma with getting access to opportunities that I know a lot of friends abroad who I literally like consult for. I'm like, okay, you want to start a nonprofit? This is what you should do. And then 2 months later, they're like, oh, well, where can we go now to like give out XYZ to students? I'm like,
Yes.
how? How? I've been doing
For
this
how
for
many
three
years?
years.
Yes.
What? So now I'm having to like focus on like getting an actual job, because I have like experiences across a number of industries. I've worked at Facebook, so now I'm trying to use that resume. I have like three resumes for like non-profit, and yeah, to leverage and get a job and use the money from that job, the salary, to fund my activism and my change making. That's my reality now. It's like 2023, literally my resolutions for the year, which I usually don't make, was get a job this month. As you're getting a job, funnel that salary from your job into your LEARNBLUE, and like a project LEARNBLUE is going to run for the year, and then amplify that. And that's literally the goal, because there's only so much change making that you can do if you, one, don't have a job, or two, if you're in a system that doesn't recognize your voice. And it's worse for women, like you said. Being a woman, then being a Nigerian woman, it's like something, and it's pretty wild.
Yeah, and as you said, you spoke about defining your why, and I think that that's so important because we've spoken about how frustrating it is, like starting a non-profit at a young age or as a young person, following through with that non-profit and not like giving up. It's important for you to always think back and reflect and remember why you started something. And I think that that's so important. I think that that's a very really important point that you've given us, so thank you very much for that, Joshua. Okay.
Thank you.
So next question, we've spoken about the biggest lesson you've learned, and luckily, as you said, it wasn't necessarily a again, we don't use failure, we don't use regret. Wasn't necessarily a bad thing, like the lesson that you learned. Yeah, it
Negative.
wasn't negative, exactly.
Yeah.
It wasn't negative. But what would you say has been like your biggest success when it comes to Learn Blue? Because I see that you've done a lot, you've achieved a lot.
Oh,
So like what do you think is like that thing that like maybe when you're down, you're
have
like,
I
yeah,
done?
you have. I mean, you're telling me that you work with Facebook, you've done
Yeah.
this, please.
Oh my goodness. I mean, my biggest success. Um. Whew, okay, I'm not sure actually. You see, the problem is, I don't know if you've been there, but your brain plays a trick on you with imposter syndrome, where whenever you one up yourself and you're doing better than you thought you could ever do, then there is something. And like, let me give you an example. To date, I think my biggest success would be, it's not even a success. Just some of my biggest accomplishments that I'm proud of would be, obviously, becoming a Teen Vogue 21 under 21. Like, that was, I did not apply for it. There's a different feeling when you don't apply for something
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, we recognize you. It's like, you saw me? Like, how did you find me? Like, I'm not that big, am I? So I got that in 2021, and that was amazing. And I think that's something I always look back to, when I'm like, oh, Joshua, Team Vogue reached out to you.
Yeah.
Like, that should count. And then this year, I think I was mentioned on Forbes, in a Forbes article, by the co-CEOs of Peace Fest, which is so mind blowing to me, because I didn't know that. I didn't even know they existed, and they know my name. And I think even more recently, I was in Russia like last month for a conference. Okay, Zulu, you would understand this. I think, as a Nigerian, getting a visa to any country, that is not in Africa or East and West Africa is so hard. It's so unnecessarily hard. I've, when I when I became a Team Vogue, not Team Vogue, Global Teen Leader in 2020, before the pandemic, I needed to get a US visa. I applied twice. I didn't get it. And I was being invited for a conference as a change maker. And I couldn't get a visa. And this is why this is such an accomplishment for me, because the Russian one is there is a 99.9% chance that you're not getting a visa. Actually, you're not even getting an
Oh
appointment.
wow.
You know, because it's so hard. There is a war going on. There was just so many things that are working against you. And then there was me, Joshua. I was turning 22 on the 19th of November last year, and so on a day before my birthday, like I had seen a friend of mine, Honoree.LEARNBLUE, who she posted on her Instagram close friend story that she had been invited to this conference in Russia. It's all expense paid, and so on and so forth. And I knew about this conference. I knew it existed, but again, I have never thought of reaching out to them because they didn't reach out to me. And I'm just like, why would I reach out? Like, who am I? Because till now, I don't still believe a lot of things that I've done. I'm like, was that really me? And so she posted this, and I'm like, oh, okay. I've never seen Aranima in my life before. We've never met physically. And so my plan was, if she could get invited, then if I reached out, they probably would, I don't know, invite me too, because we have very similar portfolios. She's obviously much more, I don't know, influential than me. She has a TED talk, I don't, but we're close friends. We have very similar sort of accolades together, and I feel like if it was sort of based on merit, perhaps I would have been invited. And so, on the 9th of November 18th, in 9th before I turned 22, I sent an email to the team organizing the conference saying, "Hey, I'm Joshua, yada yada. Invite me to your conference." And I'm like, if you're wondering why you should do that, that's because I'm Joshua, and that should count for something. And that was such a bold step. Like I was just being bougie. I'm like, do you know who I am? And then I reached out, and they did not answer me. Obviously, they basically left me on red. But then after I turned 22, I was like, you know what? What's the worst that could possibly happen? The worst that could happen is they're gonna say no. They're not gonna beat me up. They're definitely not gonna kill me. So let's reach out to them again and remind them that Joshua sent them an email. And so, I sent an email and I said, "Hey, I'm here again to disturb you. I reached out before. You probably ignored me. So now I'm gonna email." Like I got a new email address on their website that was very specific to speaking at the conference. I'm like, I'm gonna email this one, and I hope somebody sees it. And then they finally responded. Long story short, in the space of, we had this was happening from like the 24th of November, and the conference was on the 1st of December. So Zulu, we had 6 7 days, literally a week, to one, write my speech, complete the speech, because I was giving a keynote, which I did not even see coming. They're like, "Oh, you're gonna give a keynote." I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay, cool. I have to do this." And so I wrote a speech, which was the most pressure I'd ever been under in my life, because it's such a big conference. There are gonna be millions of people watching. I had no idea at the time. Obviously, I was like, "Oh, it's pretty big." And so I wrote my speech, and then I had to record it, and they brought in a team from Abuja to come to Benin, which is why it's cool, to
Wow.
record me in a studio speaking. Which, because initially I thought, oh, at most what's come to us, I'm going to be on a Zoom call. They're like, "Yeah, no, you're not going to be on Zoom. We're going to record you in a studio. We're going to put you on green screen, and you're going to look great." I was like, "Okay, okay, that's good." And as that was happening, I then had a meeting with the team, and we're doing like this test for like English language proficiency. They want to know if I could speak English, which I'm like, really? But we had a call, and we're like, "Oh, great, you can speak good English, great." So we cannot bring it to Russia this year because it's already late. Because now we had like 4 days to go. There's like it's already pretty late. Or 5 days, I think. But what we can do is we're gonna try to use all the resources we have at our disposal and get you
Oh
here.
wow.
Never in my life have I seen. I think there's only one exception, and that would be we are Family Foundation. But never in my life have I ever seen a team sort of come together with such solidarity for an absolute stranger, to bring this stranger who was 22 years old to Russia to give a speech. Like, it was just surreal. So even if I had not gone to Russia, right, the experience was already so fulfilling. I think it reassured me that the work that I do was important and my voice was being heard. And if this team was making every single effort and pulling every string to get me to their conference, that means I'm doing something right. So I had already made peace with, like, if I don't get to be in Russia physically, that's all good. Et voila. A day on the Friday, like 3 days to the event, they're like, or 4 days, I don't know. They're like, hey, so we have a surprise for you. We got the government of Moscow to invite you to
Whoa.
Moscow, and so your visa would be processed like a diplomatic visa, and you would get it in like
Whoa.
3 hours and the same day. I'm like, wait, what? I'm sorry, what? What? And the Nigerian in me couldn't believe it's like, I'm like, nah, that's
Like,
impossible. Like they
is this
wouldn't.
real life?
Is that possible? Like I was, is this real life? Like, is this happening? Like, I couldn't believe it. So I didn't tell anybody that I was traveling. I told none of my friends. In fact, all I did was I just they sort of I arranged, like, booked my flight to Abuja, and then I arrived at Abuja on a Sunday, and on Monday morning I had the visa interview, and on Tuesday I was leaving the country. At least that was the plan. And so I was still very skeptical. I'm like, this is not possible, right? Like, you couldn't get a visa in one day. Like, am I dreaming? What is going on? And I was so anxious. I'm like, should I wear a suit to the embassy? Should I dress casual? They're like, no, just wear short. You're good. And I walked into the embassy with a little short, and just like, I had like, God, I had like my passport and a document of invitation and my application form, just 3 papers, 3 sheet of paper. And I submitted, and they're like, oh, welcome. Just sit now. We're going to confirm, yada, yada. Long story short, they said, oh, you're gonna get your visa, and then I paid for it, and then I literally waited for like 20 minutes or less, and I got my visa. Like, my passport got taken, it got stamped, and it got given to me, and then I'm like, oh, I'm actually going to Russia.
What?
And the next day I was in an airport, and getting on the plane and getting. But so I think that's my biggest. I think if anybody ever asks, that's my biggest success today. It's just the level of, I don't know. It just reassured me in a lot of ways that I can do almost literally anything, and my story is what you have been told. And even getting to Russia itself, which obviously is my first time, that the experience there was also surreal. The team was so welcoming. So I literally was like a celebrity. Like the team was like, "Oh, you're the celebrity of the conference." Like, what do you mean? Because everybody knew my story. Like, apparently everybody who mattered had known about this boy from Nigeria, the only Nigerian there, by the way, who wrote to them and said he wanted to speak. So it was so new to them. Like, that has never happened in the history of the conference, and it's been running for like 4 years now. Um, but the problem with that is, when I was in Russia, everything was great. I loved the experience. It was amazing people. I gave my talk. We had about 1 million people watching. So mind blowing, anxiety, everything. And then I got back home to Nigeria because I had exams. Literally, like the day after I arrived in the country, I almost died. I was so jet lagged. I got back in Nigeria, and the next day I had a paper by 8 a.m. I'm like, what on earth is going on in my life right now? Um, and so I focused on my exams, and then after my exams, I had a wave of like depression, and the depression wasn't because I know you didn't see that coming,
No.
right? that was such a turn. I'm
No,
so
it's
sorry,
okay. That's
but
the truth.
but
That's what
yeah, I got
happened.
pretty
Mm-hmm.
depressed. Yeah, just because of um. I had exams as a distraction, so I was like, oh, okay, this was fun. I went to Russia, but it was until I put my leg on the pedal, the brake, and I was like, soak it in. What just happened? Like, what on earth just happened? Till today, I'm still yet to get over it. So I've not even reached out to the people whose business cards I collected, because I'm like, I don't even know where to start. But I got depressed because my brain. I don't know if it happens with other people. I know it happens with a close friend of mine, Shay, where your brain tells you that you are not worthy of certain things and you don't deserve certain things. And it's not like it tells you it doesn't tell you that directly, but because you've been amongst people who, quote and unquote, have done less than you in terms of the impact that has been made, and they're not. It's not even. It's not envy. I promise you. In fact, I admire people like that. It's more like it just puts you in perspective of how unequal opportunities are. Like, you're not on the same footing as them. And so when I was in Russia, I met a lot of young people who are doing amazing work. These are people who are studying nuclear energy. These are activists who are talking about how Africa can be powered by nuclear, things that are mind blowing, that are amazing. And then I'm like, and then they're like, oh, they admire me, and I'm like, what is wrong with you? And then I come back home, I'm like, I'm thinking back about that. I'm like, why? Like, why was I even amongst them? Like, why am I amongst these people, and why are we in the same circle?
Mhm.
It thought of like, did I deserve to be in this circle? You know, like I know they think I did deserve it, and in fact, they thought I am amazing, good for them. But like personally, I just keep questioning like, was I deserving of this? And it takes a shit. I'm gonna say shit turn again, like a ton of like effort from my friends to be physically present to tell me, you know what, you're good. Like, don't overthink it, because like at least for me, the experience was I left the country not for the first time, but for the first time to Europe, to Russia
Mhm.
in winter. So there's obviously that whole thing with like snow that Nigerians do. I didn't do it, thank God. But that was like in itself like a whole experience. Like, oh my God, it's snow! It's like crystalline. So there was that experience, and then there was the other experience of like you didn't the Russia. And as when you're invited as a guest to a place, you have a certain reception that you're given. You're treated with so much respect and so much dignity and so much, all of that stuff. And then you come back home and it's a stark contrast with like what you just experienced, and you're not expecting home to suddenly become like glorious and glamorous. But it's like, what on earth just happened? It's like your country doesn't even fully appreciate the work that you do. It's like I'm back in Nigeria, and immediately I just literally landed in the airport. You're just like, oh freaking hell, I'm back home. Right. So now I have to do what again? Yeah, but enough of that talk. But basically, I guess my point was my biggest accomplishment, which was the question. So bringing it back around, is just my ability to I don't know, get into places that are not for me. And some of those instances can be with getting on Teen Vogue. I think I was the only African on Teen Vogue in 2021. And this year also, or last year, the only African on Teen Vogue was also somebody who I nominated, which is just mind blowing in itself. So getting access to opportunities that gives me the ability to open doors for others who might not otherwise have access to those opportunities. That is my biggest success. Being like the network, the uncle or the friend or the cousin in places, that cousin who knows this cousin who knows that person who can get you that opportunity or that scholarship or that grant or that recommendation. That's my success. It's not one single thing. It's not one event. It's not one experience. It's just a combination of like experiences and a combination of results from those experiences and how they help me alleviate, I guess, my community, if that makes any
It did,
sense.
it does, it will. To whoever's listening, first off, I have a few things to say. First off, I don't like that you said not for you, because those places are for you. It might not be, you might be the first person there, but you deserve those spots. And I hope that you keep saying that to yourself, Joshua. Please, no to imposter syndrome this year. Like, it's something that I've really battled with. And it's easy for me to say, oh no to imposter syndrome to someone else, but it would be harder for me to say it to myself and hype myself up. But like, honestly, you need to hype yourself
Yeah,
up.
yeah, it
You've done
is.
you've done so much. Like, honestly, when I was reading
Yeah.
up about you, I was like, ah, what's going on, please? Who is this person and why does he not like?
I don't even know this
No,
guy.
I'm serious, Joshua. I'm not even like trying to hype you up or anything. Like me, I don't know how to form. I don't know how to, like, honestly, you've done so many amazing things, and I hope that you are proud of yourself. And that's, and it hurts me to see that, like, you're still like saying like that sentence when you said, "Oh, places are not for me." I was like, no, no, we're going to stop that. This is not the place for that. You need to hype yourself up. Like, you've
Okay,
worked hard. Like, you've
amen,
you've reached
amen to
w-
that.
you did you not hear the story you were telling me about the campaign that you started just on a whim? How many people you impacted? Did you not hear the story? Please, when we're done with this podcast and it's published, you need to come and listen to this interview again so that you see that you're not to be played with. Honestly, I'm actually dead serious. Please, please, please. Like, I've not even done half of what you've done.
I
And
think, I
yeah, go
think,
ahead.
I think what worries me is it's not really worry. What downs me is, and I know this is general for everyone, I guess, anyway, but it's when you last year, for example, I started the year strong. I was like, oh my god, this is my year. I'm gonna yada yada. And so I applied for X and Y and Z, and I wrote the best stories. I rewrote the stories. I spoke about the impact we've had. We've reached millions of people on social media. I have people who joined my webinars and now they have their own non-profits in the US. In Nigeria, literally one just got on Teen Vogue last year. So I know the impact I have made. I try to talk about that impact in these applications. And then you get um we're sorry. Unfortunately, we're so sad to tell you that your application did not make it this year because like why? And when you get one of those and you're like, okay, I'm good, I can go, and then you get two, and then you get three, and then you get four, and then you get five, and then you get six. I'm sure I got like at least 10 of those last year, and I was just like, yeah, I'm done. So things like experiences like that just downs us. And again, it's nobody's fault per se, but I mean, these programs or these scholarships or whatever, they have quotas to meet. They have diversity, things to like meet. Maybe this percentage of men or this percentage of black people or what. I don't know how it works, but when it happens consecutively, it's so
It is.
draining. Which is why the experiences like me reaching out to these people for in Russia, mean so much more because it just validate like every award I get. I don't hype my like I said, I don't hype myself enough, I guess. But I don't like literally a week after I got on Team Vogue, I'm like, oh, that was fun. Moving on.
Moving on.
Like,
You
what's
don't
next?
celebrate
And
too
then same thing
much.
happened with the Fox, and I'm like, yeah, I don't celebrate. It's like, oh, that was fun while it lasted. I gotta move on now. So whenever I have the successes, it just gives me like this boost of energy, like Joshua, you can do it. But when I get the rejections, which are way more than the successes, like way more, it just affects me so much. And it's not just me. I know a lot of my friends who deal with that, where it's like, yeah,
Mhm.
like, should you even continue? And again, like, which brings us back to the beginning of the conversation, which comes back to your why, because the amount of rejections I had last year and the mental breakdowns, trust me, Lembla has been on the verge of being ended, if you will, like a lot of time. Like, oh, should I just like stop Lemblu? Like, should I just go build something else? And now I'm starting the year feeling strong, and I'm thinking I wanna resume work at Lemblu, but even more, I want to launch an entirely new project out of Lemblu, and then sort of focus on that. That's more focused around maybe storytelling and things like that. But yeah, that's why things are the way they are, Zulu. But I get where you're coming from regards hype. My friends have told me like hype yourself, mark your wins, celebrate your wins. I'm like, yeah, I don't know about
No, I
that.
totally
I'll try. I
understand.
will
It's
try,
a
but I don't know.
process.
But also as a Nigerian, there is this thing where if you get to if you if you get too excited about your wins, I don't not like I care about people's sentiment, but like there's a way you get excited, people will be like, you see that?
I feel
And then
that.
that's another thing with that. It's like this boy, like I have a lot of people who I've never, like I've never met them before, and then when I do meet them, they're like, "Oh my god, I had a misconception about you." I'm like, "Oh, well, that's fun." Would you mind telling me what that misconception? Because I have a very strict brand on social media. You may have noticed this, Zulu. My Twitter, my LinkedIn, my Instagram, they are very. Firstly, all the usernames are the same. The brand is very strict. My bios are strict. They communicate the same message. I don't post what I'm doing for fun. I only post maybe when I have something to say. Every single Instagram post has a lengthy, caption that tells a story. Like that's a brand of beauty, and for that reason, people presume a lot of things about me, and then they meet me and like, oh, okay, well that's not what I thought, and so that's why I don't get to celebrate a lot because those celebrations make people think. Yeah, too. Yeah, they're like, God, this guy's too proud. And then they meet you, you're like, oh, he doesn't even remember what he won last.
I totally understand. Yeah, okay, so we know about your biggest lesson, your biggest success, a bit about Learn Blue, but could you just tell us a bit about like some of the events and initiatives that you do and you put in place? Do you have campaigns? How do you educate young people? Because I know that that's like the main focus of Learn Blue.
Yeah. Events and initiatives. I think we do a lot of things. I think one of the things that we've always tried to do is social media campaigns that are very very tailored. It could be okay. So most times we take like a trending conversation or a soon to be trending conversation, and then we amplify that conversation using my team's social media savvy. right? So we understand how SEO works, we understand how algorithms often work, and so we try to curate content around certain subjects. It could be climate change, it could be gender equality, it could be Black Lives Matter, it could be anything really. We try to create content or curate content around that, and then push it into the world. On occasion, we may run advertising on it, like if it's that pressing. For example, during the Amazon fire thing in 2019, and I think during the Mauritius oil spill in 2020, we did two like major tweets and Facebook posts where we essentially wrote a story around the Amazon fire, and then that went viral on Facebook, and then we did something else on Twitter, and then that went viral and got thousands of people to sign petitions. So that are the strategy we've always sort of used was, I think we called it the four: educate, activate, activate, something, and then iterate. I know it was three. It was like four things. So the idea was we educate people and then we activate them, like they should become activists or go start their own initiatives, and then oh yes, we petition. That was the other word. Then we petition and then we repeat. So it was sort of a four-step process. The way you've got like reduce, reuse, refuse, and recycle. So we do like a four-step process for every single campaign and event. However, for 2023, we're making a bit of a change where we're focusing more on storytelling. So we're going to be having the plan is to have a conference, but pending when that it comes to fruition, the goal is to launch a project with called Anxiety, which was initially meant to be a podcast to talk to young people, especially in the climate space, about eco anxiety. But now we're moving that more into a project that is focused on storytelling. So we're having webinars, we're having workshops where we bring together founders for social enterprises around Nigeria who would then help us, who we will then help sort of with their storytelling abilities. So, how do you talk about yourself or your projects in a way that gets your listeners hooked,
Yeah.
right? And things like that. So that's sort of where we're headed now.
Nice. Nice. That sounds
Yeah, I
really
hope that answers the
interesting.
question.
Yeah, it does. That sounds really interesting, and I can't wait to see. Like I said earlier, I think you're a great storyteller. So
Thank
it
you.
will be really good to see how that translates more into your climate work. And yeah, I'm very excited to see um what Learn Blue's future holds. And I think you sort of answered my next question, which was about like the plans for the future. Beyond like the storytelling, the webinars that you plan on doing, is there any other thing that we can look forward
Yeah.
to when it comes to Learn Blue's future, or Learn Blue's 2023, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, Lemblue, we have a lot in the pipeline, but I think I have this thing where I don't tend to talk about sort of what I have in my head, for the fear that what if it doesn't happen, and then it's like, oh, if it's easier to not fail when there is sort of nothing to fail towards, if that makes any
Yeah,
sense,
yeah,
right? So I think the most I would say is what we're actually going to do is, again, these workshops, but also we would be having the plan is to begin building innovative tools that would help mitigate certain impacts of maybe flooding and climate change. It's a very complex technical territory that we're trying to delve into, with some partnerships already in the works. But again, I don't think there is much I can say about it yet until it's live and there's a product or something.
yeah.
But yeah.
No, that sounds really cool.
But yeah, thank you, Chizuru. Or the Zulu for
So, last question before I leave you, because I know our time is far spent. Oh, okay, actually, two questions, then we're done. So, could you just tell us how people could connect with Learn Blue, and you as well? So, how can people get involved, one with Learn Blue, and how can people get involved or connect rather with you? And then I ask my final question after you
yeah.
answer this.
Okay. Yeah. The funny thing I'm gonna say is, as far as connecting with Lemblu or me, well, Lemblu specifically, honestly, they should probably connect with you. You guys should follow Zulu on LinkedIn, because Lemblu is gonna be hiring soon. We're not hiring. That sounds like we have money. We don't. We're gonna be recruiting volunteers soon. For a number of for a number of positions. So I would be needing your help, Zulu, with like sort of putting that on your LinkedIn and saying if people want to come
Of
work with us,
course.
that's fine.
Of course.
Preferably like young people within like 19, 18, 17 to like 24 or something. But how you can connect with me personally, my social media handle is the same across all platforms. It's Josh G Shei. For those of you who are Nigerians, you should be able to like spell that Josh, then G as in Gabriel, then Shei as in SEYI. or let me toot my horn, or just Google me,
Okay.
just Google my name. I think you
Okay.
should feel like a lot of reference points on how you can connect with me. My goodness, but yeah, I think that should
Okay,
help.
great. Okay, I thought it was one question less, but it's two actually. Then we're done, I promise.
The
Yes.
final.
Okay, first question before the last question. What we always ask this, Kurerie is an Isoko word. Isoko is a tribe in Delta State where my mom is from and where I'm from as well. But it's a word that means change. So I'd like to know, what does change mean to you?
Change mean to me. Hmm. Change. I don't know. In the beginning of the call, I like bringing things back and sort of taking things full circle. It's sort of my old storyteller stitch. But in the beginning of the call, you mentioned quite, sparsely about how anybody can sort of make change, and that's something that LEARNBLUE has embodied since its founding. Our entire motto or tagline is "It begins with us. Change begins with us." What that means is change can begin with you, with anyone. You don't have to be a non-profit founder. You don't have to be a LinkedIn top voice. You don't have to be, a verified Twitter celebrity or an actor or something to quote and unquote make change. Change can mean changing behaviors that are more sustainable, changing habits that are reducing your carbon footprints, changing recognizing that you're privileged and you can do something about maybe gender inequality or gender-based violence or female genital mutilation. So to me, change is essentially whatever action people are taking that directly or indirectly makes the world a better place. That feels very that feels very rehearsed, but I promise it wasn't. That's just what I feel like it is. So yeah.
Thank you for that. I mean, that also, as you said, embodies what change means to us, and we're trying to show, same with Learn Blue, young people, how they can create change with their small actions, with speaking to someone next door, with picking up debts on your road, with making a conscious decision to be kind even to other people. So I think that's a perfect definition of change. But now, our final question. Yes, we've come to the end of the interview. Our final question we always ask our guests is to give us your top three recommendations. Now, your recommendations could be anything. So it could be a podcast, it could be maybe a motto that you live by now, it could be a book that you've read, a video you've watched, anything at all. So, three things that you're loving right now that you think young people, like young change makers, should tune into.
Yeah. Can I say Avatar?
No,
No.
no, if you
Um.
want. Yeah, hey, like I think
I
our
don't know.
last episode with Yasmina,
I
she
don't.
said the Beyonce's new
Yeah.
album. So, hey, go for it.
Oh, okay. Well then. Well, I mean, if she says so. Yeah. I mean, Avatar. I don't know. I saw it like yesterday, and the story was pretty inspiring. It was just very. I know there's a lot of talk about it online about it being negative and yada yada, but I think it's pretty good. It's a very simple story. Somebody trying to protect their family. A man essentially doing anything to protect his family, and then a community coming together to help make that a reality, right? That's people banding together in times of adversity, despite differences in their cultures and their race. Actually, that's Avatar. Another one I think for books would be. I don't read books actually a lot. I'm not the biggest fan, but I think a recommendation I would give, not read books specifically, just sort of in terms of reading, is I do a lot of random research. So I go on Google, I know, and I just search for something about, say, I don't know, football or climate change or not necessarily educational, but I do a lot of, like, I call it sort of literally internet surfing, where I just search something on Google, maybe because somebody made a statement, and then I learn about that topic. So again, it could be something as simple as, what is Kurerie meaning? Like, what's the meaning of that, or what's the history of that? And then I jump from one web page to the next and like get into a rabbit hole of learning content. I think the third recommendation would just be social media. I know, cliche, but you can use social media to honestly like make so much impact. Like, you can use it to change the world. Quite literally, like, there are countries who use social media to incite violence. So why can we not use social media to organize for good? Like, you're using social media to incite violence in countries around the world. If you're blocking social media, that means it has got a lot of power. So if countries are going to be doing that, then young people can as well use it to organize movements, you can use it to organize protests, you can use it to talk about something you're passionate about. Yeah, you can become a creator, by just going on TikTok and saying, "Hey guys, so today X and Y happened in my school and I stood up for that kid who got bullied." Or, "Hey guys, I don't know, I was walking home today and I decided I would stop throwing plastic waste on the floor." Simple things like that. So social media can be very useful. I know it's got a lot of negative connotations to it, but if you're able to sort of not be, I mean, social media shows you what you want to see. Like, it's all algorithmic. So if your algorithm is focused on change makers, trust me, you would see that literally all I see on my LinkedIn is people who are getting scholarships every. It's like, what is going on? Maybe anyone who's losing in life, like, I just open my LinkedIn and I'm seeing, oh, X was named an Ashoka change maker. Oh, this person is now getting the Mandela Washington College. Like, what is happening? But my point is, it's all about that space. So if you're able to control your space on social media, you can use it to make change in the world. But I think with that sort of sums up all I have to say for this podcast. Again, thank you so much, Velu, for talking to me for over an hour. And to the listeners who are probably gonna get bored at some point, but if you if you do, just skip to the interesting parts. But yeah, I'm so grateful for having this conversation, and you're such a gem. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
being such a vibe.
Thank you for your time, Joshua. Thank you for speaking with me. Thank you so much, Joshua. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you'd like to learn more about Kurerie, check out our website at www.kurerie.com and follow us on all our social media at ma.kurerie. Thank you for listening.